It started like any other Saturday morning. Our street was still waking up. Birds chirping from the thick oaks lining Maple Grove Lane, sprinklers hissing across perfectly edged lawns, and the scent of brewing coffee drifting through open kitchen windows. Our house sat right on the bend of the cul-de-sac, a modest but comfortable two-story colonial with navy blue shutters and a porch swing that always made me feel like time moved just a little slower. That morning, I was flipping pancakes in the kitchen while my wife, Jessica, hollered upstairs for our son Ryan to grab his shin guards. He had soccer practice at 9 a.m., and like always, he was running late. He's 11, bursting with energy and that stubborn independence kids develop just before they hit middle school. But he's a good kid, respectful, curious, a little too obsessed with Minecraft and dinosaurs. But hey, there are worse hobbies. Jessica came into the kitchen, still tying her hair back, and handed me Ryan's water bottle. "He's got in reverse again," she said, already annoyed. I laughed, flipping a pancake. What is this, the third time this week? Fourth. Ryan had been riding his electric scooter around the block like it was his personal racetrack. That scooter was his pride and joy, a birthday gift from his grandparents, complete with blinking LEDs and a tiny built-in Bluetooth speaker he used to blast music from. It wasn't the most expensive thing in the world, but it made him feel like he was flying. That morning, just after he wolfed down his pancakes, he grabbed his gym bag and zipped outside. We watched from the kitchen window as he darted around the curve at the edge of our street, his helmet slightly crooked, his little backpack bouncing behind him. The sun caught the chrome on his scooter, and for a moment, I remember thinking, this is it. These are the moments you live for as a parent. Just ordinary joy. But that moment didn't last. Across the street, we saw a silver Lexus SUV whip around the far corner of the neighborhood like it was late for a Formula One time trial. I frowned. Jessica squinted. Oh God, is that Karen? Yep, Karen Whitmore. If you've ever lived in an HOA-run neighborhood, you know the type. Short blonde bob, big sunglasses regardless of the weather, yoga pants without any sign of a gym bag, and a walkie-talkie clipped to her hip like she was dispatching fire crews. She had moved in 2 years ago and immediately started throwing her weight around the HOA like it was her own personal empire. Rules, fines, inspections, passive-aggressive newsletters. Her signature was on more warning letters than the HOA president's. But worst of all, she was reckless behind the wheel. Always speeding, always texting, and always with some excuse like, "I'm late for a board meeting," or "this is an emergency," as if dry cleaning or bunco night counted as emergencies. That morning, Karen sped past our house, going at least 40, if not more. Her SUV kicked up dust and sent leaves spinning in her wake. I opened the door, half ready to shout, but Jessica grabbed my arm. "Wait, Ryan's out there." That's when we heard it, a sickening thud, then a metal scrape, then silence. For a half second, I couldn't move. I remember thinking, maybe it was a trash bin, maybe he dodged her, maybe it wasn't him. But then I saw the scooter, crumpled in the street. Jessica was already running. Her scream ripped through the air, so raw and guttural I'll never forget it. Ryan was lying on the pavement, halfway in our neighbor's yard, one shoe off, his helmet cracked. He wasn't moving. I don't remember running. I just remember being there, kneeling, yelling his name. Jessica sobbing, holding his hand. There was blood on his knee, his elbow, and a gash above his brow. His eyes fluttered, barely open. And then I heard her. Karen. She stepped out of her Lexus like she had just dinged a mailbox, not hit a child. He darted out. He came out of nowhere, she shouted, hands on her hips. "You need to teach him to watch where he's going." I turned, stunned. "You hit my son." She shrugged. "I barely touched him. He's fine." Jessica turned on her like a storm. "You were going 40. He's 11. You hit him, and all you care about is blaming him." Karen folded her arms. "Well, maybe now he'll learn. Kids today don't respect the road." That was it. That line. Maybe now he'll learn. Like this was some kind of lesson. Like she was doing him a favor by hitting him. The paramedics arrived minutes later. Our neighbor, Mr. Jensen, had already called 911. They stabilized Ryan, strapped him onto a stretcher, and loaded him into the ambulance. Jessica rode with him, her hands trembling the entire time. I stayed behind to give a statement to the responding officer. Karen tried to smooth talk her way through it. "Officer," he came flying around the bend. "It's not my fault. I mean, he wasn't even on the sidewalk. Isn't that a violation of the HOA code?" The cop, a tall man named Sergeant Whitlock, gave her a look I'll never forget. "Ma'am, you hit a child with your car. Let's not talk about code violations." She scoffed and mumbled something about entitled parents. When I asked if she was going to be cited, Sergeant Whitlock said the investigation was ongoing. They'd need to pull the neighborhood's camera footage, including any security cams nearby. Lucky for us, our next-door neighbor had just installed a new Ring camera facing the street. But here's where things got weird. That night, while Jessica stayed at the hospital with Ryan, I returned home to grab some clothes and supplies. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Karen was in front of her house, on a ladder, fiddling with her Ring doorbell, at 11:30 at night. Now, maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe she was updating firmware or tightening a screw, but something didn't sit right. The next morning, Officer Whitlock called me. "We've got a situation," he said. Apparently, Karen had already submitted her version of the incident to the HOA. Not the police, the HOA. She wrote a full report claiming that Ryan had intentionally swerved into her car, recklessly endangering her property. She even mentioned that her front fender had a scratch and that parents should be liable for children who cause vehicular damage. Vehicular damage. That's what she called it. My kid was in a hospital bed, stitched up with a mild concussion, and she was worried about her bumper. It got worse. 3 days later, we received an official notice from the HOA, a violation letter. It read, "Per eyewitness accounts and submitted documentation, your minor child was observed operating an electric scooter recklessly and without regard for traffic protocols within the HOA zone. As such, a formal violation has been issued. You are responsible for the repair costs to the Whitmore property and are subject to a fine of $450 under Clause 6.2.9. Damage to property due to minor supervision failure." I stared at the letter in disbelief. They were fining us. Jessica broke down crying, not just from the letter, but from the total betrayal of a community we thought we trusted. Ryan was barely sleeping. The trauma was already taking a toll. Nightmares. Jumping at loud sounds. Every time a car drove by our window, he flinched. And Karen? She walked around the neighborhood like nothing happened, still sipping her green smoothies, still barking at people to pull their trash bins in before 9 a.m., still waving that damn HOA rulebook like it was gospel. She even had the nerve to post on the neighborhood app, "Parents, please make sure your children are aware of traffic safety. Not everyone will be as forgiving as I was." Forgiving? That post set the neighborhood on fire. Some neighbors defended her. Others were furious. But one thing became clear. Karen wasn't just reckless. She was dangerous. And she had no intention of backing down. But what she didn't know, what she could never have expected, was that I wasn't backing down either. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because I was about to hit back. Not with threats. Not with shouting matches. But with something she couldn't fight. Truth, evidence, and a level of revenge she'd never see coming. By the end of the week, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage, not the kind that explodes in a single moment and fades away. This was deeper, like a low, slow burn that reached into every quiet second I had of myself. While my son lay bruised and stitched in a hospital bed, the woman who hit him was out walking her dog, laughing with neighbors, and filing HOA complaints like it was just another week in her little kingdom. I couldn't let it go. I wouldn't. Jessica had always known me to be the patient one. The one who mediated when neighbor disputes got loud, who calmed her down when HOA Karen sent her yet another ridiculous warning letter about unapproved flower pot colors. But this wasn't about potted plants or lawn lengths. This was about our son, and the HOA siding with the woman who hurt him. Karen's violation letter wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a message. She was doubling down. She truly believed Ryan was at fault, and worse. She thought she could use the HOA to silence us, to twist the narrative, to bury what she'd done under piles of rules and technicalities. She didn't know who she was dealing with. I started with the ring footage. Our neighbor, Mr. Jensen, had already offered it to police, but I asked him for a copy too. The clip was clear, crystal clear. Ryan riding his scooter carefully, staying on the edge of the road, looking both ways at the intersection. Then Karen's Lexus barreling around the corner, way too fast, tires squealing slightly as she overcorrected and clipped him. There was no way she could argue her way out of that. I uploaded the footage to a flash drive, made copies, and backed it up to cloud storage. But that wasn't enough. I wanted the HOA to see it too, unfiltered. I emailed the board directly, attaching the video along with a carefully written statement. This is clear evidence that Karen Whitmore was speeding and fully responsible for the accident involving our son. Your issuance of a violation notice and fine is not only premature, but deeply inappropriate. I request an immediate revocation of the violation, a formal apology, and a review of Karen's driving conduct under community safety policies. If this request is ignored, I will escalate the matter through legal channels and local news media. I kept it professional, but firm. 3 days later, I got the reply. Dear Mr. Landon, we've reviewed your submission and appreciate your concern. However, HOA disciplinary matters are handled based on community code, not external evidence unless submitted directly through proper HOA adjudication channels. You are welcome to schedule a dispute hearing. Regards, M. Trask, HOA Board Compliance Chair. Proper adjudication channels? Jessica was beside herself. They're covering for her. No, I said, they're scared of her. And they were. Karen wasn't just some annoying board member. She was a dominant voice on it. Rumor had it she'd once single-handedly gotten a family evicted for unauthorized guests because they let their teenage nephew stay over too often. She knew the HOA bylaws inside and out, mostly so she could weaponize them. But here's where things turned. Sergeant Whitlock called me again. Thought you want to know. We reviewed the footage, and we're officially citing Ms. Whitmore for reckless driving and failure to yield to a pedestrian. It was a small win, but it felt like oxygen after weeks underwater. What's the penalty? I asked. She'll get a court date and fines. Maybe points on her license. Depends on the judge. But this goes on her record. Still, Karen didn't seem fazed. The next day, she stood on her porch like always, holding her HOA clipboard like a badge of honor. And then she doubled down again. She started canvassing the neighborhood with flyers. Actual printed flyers. They had the HOA logo, though clearly not approved by the board, and they were titled, A Neighborhood Safety Reminder. In the flyer, she warned residents to monitor reckless children and claimed an incident had occurred due to unsupervised minor behavior. She even wrote, Let this be a reminder. Our streets are for responsible residents. If your child can't ride safely, maybe they shouldn't ride at all. Jessica almost tore the paper in half when she read it. She's slandering Ryan. She's turning everyone against us. I walked the block that night. Quietly. No yelling. No confrontation. Just observation. And what I saw infuriated me. Half the neighbors had those flyers on their doors. Some had already tossed them. Others, like the Wilsons across the street, had pinned them on their bulletin board in the kitchen like it was gospel. We were being painted as a problem family. But not everyone bought it. A few neighbors, the real ones, started reaching out quietly. Soft knocks on the door. Messages in the neighborhood app. One woman, Lisa, sent us a message. I'm so sorry about Ryan. That flyer is disgusting. If you need me to speak up at the HOA hearing, I will. And that's when the idea came to me. If Karen wanted to weaponize the HOA process, I'd beat her at her own game. Legally, methodically, and with witnesses. I requested a formal HOA grievance hearing. Per their own bylaws, which I had now memorized better than Karen ever had, I included the police citation against Karen, the video footage from 2 separate homes, a signed statement from Mr. Jensen, and another neighbor who had witnessed the crash, copies of Karen's slanders flyers, and a petition signed by 8 residents denouncing her behavior. They tried to delay the hearing, claimed they needed more time to verify materials. But I kept pushing. When the hearing finally came, it was held in the small community clubhouse, the same place they hosted craft nights and neighborhood BBQs. This time, the room was quiet, tense. Jessica and I walked in holding hands. Ryan stayed home with my sister. Karen sat across from us in her usual smug posture, sunglasses on her head, iced coffee in hand, a manila folder stacked with papers she'd probably been organizing all night. She looked calm, too calm. The board members, 5 of them, sat at the front table like a tribunal. Half of them barely hid their discomfort. I made my case first. I spoke plainly as a father, as a neighbor, as a member of the community who believed rules were there to protect, not persecute. I played the footage, handed out documents, answered questions, read Lisa's letter aloud, even quoted one of Karen's own flyers. Then Karen stood, and what she said turned the room ice cold. She accused Ryan of having a history of disobedience, said she'd filed numerous complaints about him before, which was a lie. She even brought up the fact that he once left his scooter on the lawn, as if that justified a moving vehicle collision. Then she said, "I believe children should be held to the same safety standards as adults. If I were speeding, so was he." Someone in the room audibly gasped. Then her final line, "And maybe if his parents taught him accountability instead of playing victim, this whole thing wouldn't have happened." That was it. Silence. Then one board member, an older woman named Carla, leaned forward and said, "Karen, you hit a child with your car. You have a police citation. There's a video of it. And you think it's the child who needs accountability?" Karen blinked, like the words hadn't registered. Another member added, "This meeting was about a violation fine issued to the Landons. After review, I think we all agree that fine should be revoked immediately." For nodded. "Karen?" She slammed her folder shut. "This is bias." No one replied. The violation was removed that night. But that wasn't the end. Because Karen wasn't just losing face. She was about to lose something bigger. Her seat on the HOA board. And that was the next phase of what would become the ultimate neighborhood takedown. I've never been a man who jumped straight to retaliation. But watching my son flinch at every sound of tires on pavement, my wife break down over the smallest reminders, and Karen parade around the neighborhood like she was some kind of martyr, something inside me shifted. You'd think that after almost hitting a child with her car, and then say he deserved it, someone would lay low, show remorse, maybe even just shut up and vanish for a while. Not Karen. Instead, she took the boldest, most delusional route possible. She doubled down. 2 days after we filed a report with the police, I noticed an envelope on our porch. Unmarked, sealed only with a strip of HOA-branded tape. Inside was a violation notice for child negligence and public disturbance. It cited our son, the one she hit, for recklessly darting into a shared road space and blamed us for encouraging unsafe behavior within HOA property lines. It wasn't even subtle. The letter was signed by the HOA vice president. A new title, Karen, had apparently been given after the incident. I'll never forget the look on my wife's face when she read that notice. Her mouth dropped open, her eyes locked on the paper like it was dripping poison. We stood on the porch in silence for a long minute, neither of us knowing what to say. But in my gut, I knew this wasn't just Karen being Karen anymore. This was a war. I took a deep breath and told my wife I needed to handle it. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded, eyes watering, and walked back inside to sit with our son. The next day, I took off work and spent the entire morning documenting every square inch of the HOA's bylaws. I downloaded their covenants, dug into meeting records, even pulled up every public filing made with the county clerk. By lunchtime, I had over 130 pages printed out and spread across our kitchen table. I wasn't just looking for revenge. I was looking for leverage. And I found it. Karen, in all her arrogance, had made a critical mistake. She'd never actually filed her change of title as HOA vice president with the official state registry. In fact, the actual VP had moved out 3 months earlier, and Karen had simply stepped in and assumed the role, without a single vote or legal acknowledgement. Even worse, she had begun signing fines and citations under that title, making them legally void. I wasn't done. I pulled up recent security footage from our home camera system. Clear as day, it showed Karen driving around the corner of our cul-de-sac, phone in hand, eyes off the road, just seconds before hitting our son. The timestamp matched the moment exactly. I made 3 calls that afternoon. The police department, our family lawyer, the local news station. The officer who had filed the original police report came out again, reviewed the new footage, and this time marked the case as reckless endangerment with aggravating circumstances. Apparently, the original officer hadn't realized Karen blamed the child publicly. That fact alone turned the case from a possible accident to something bordering on criminal. The second call, our lawyer, was even more productive. He immediately drafted a cease and desist against Karen and the HOA, warning of defamation, emotional damages, and harassment. He also filed a temporary restraining order barring Karen from interacting with our son or coming within 50 feet of our home. But the third call, that was a nuclear option. I knew a guy at Channel 12 who owed me a favor from way back. I didn't ask for much, just that he look into something going on in a local HOA that might involve negligence, abuse of power, and possibly a cover-up. 2 days later, they rolled up in a white news van and started interviewing neighbors. That's when it all unraveled for Karen. See, what Karen didn't know, what none of us did, is that she had done this before. Turns out, just 3 years prior, she'd been reported for backing her car into a teenager's bicycle and then blaming the kid for leaving it in her way. No charges stuck back then because it was a minor incident and she paid the family off quietly. But the moment people in the neighborhood saw the news crew, tongues started wagging. Stories surfaced. A Facebook group was made. Parents started comparing notes. Within 24 hours, the entire neighborhood was split into 2 camps. Those who still bowed to Karen's rules, and those who wanted her gone. I knew we had momentum, but it wasn't enough to stop Karen. No, she fought back. That evening, while we were eating dinner, I heard a knock at the door. A neighbor, Tim, was holding his phone out to me. "Dude, she's on next door. She's posting about your son again." I grabbed the phone and scrolled through the latest post. There it was. Karen had written a full-blown manifesto titled, "When Bad Parenting Puts Good Drivers in Danger." In it, she described my son as untrained, erratic, and a liability to community safety. She even suggested that children under 12 should be banned from playing near the street unless accompanied by a certified adult. That was the last straw. I picked up the phone and called our lawyer again. This time, we weren't just pursuing a restraining order. We were filing a civil lawsuit, public defamation, emotional trauma, child endangerment, abuse of HOA authority, false impersonation of a public position. And while the legal gears started turning, I began my own campaign behind the scenes. I dug up public tax records and discovered that Karen's home had unpaid HOA dues going back 9 months, over $2,300 in late fees, fines, and past due assessments. The hypocrisy was too perfect. I compiled it all into a file and handed it off to a growing group of neighbors who were quietly organizing a special vote to remove Karen from the HOA board entirely. The news station picked up on it. By the end of the week, Karen's story was all over local headlines. HOA vice president under fire for hitting child, blaming family. She tried to deny everything, posted grainy clips, made excuses about doctor footage, even tried to hold a public HOA meeting to clear the air. But it was too late. No one believed her, and the more she talked, the worse it got. She started losing friends. People stopped waving at her on the street. The neighborhood moms who used to attend her wine and gossip nights? Gone. The dad group that used to help her fix her sprinklers? Radio silent. And when the formal HOA recall vote was scheduled, something happened that nobody expected. Karen didn't show up. Instead, she posted a video on her porch, sunglasses on, voice trembling, saying she was taking a break from community affairs and would be stepping down for personal reasons. But that wasn't the end of it. Because the lawsuit, it was just about to go nuclear. If there's one thing you learn as a parent, it's that when someone hurts your child, really hurts them, you don't just get mad. You get quiet, focused. The kind of focus that makes grown men sweat in a courtroom and bureaucrats triple-check their paperwork. I wasn't interested in petty HOA politics anymore. Karen had crossed the line. She didn't just inconvenience us. She traumatized my son and tried to cover it up like it was a broken mailbox. What she didn't realize was that I had been preparing for this for weeks. The investigation had been building quietly, piece by piece. And now, it was time to set the whole thing off. The first domino fell on a Monday morning. I had scheduled a special meeting with the full HOA board, not just Karen, every member. And I brought along my lawyer, my neighbor Jason, who just happened to be a certified accident reconstruction expert, and a detective from the precinct who had taken over Jacob's case. I requested the meeting under the HOA's bylaws. As a dues-paying member, I had the right to address the board regarding any grievances. And I came armed with more than just anger. I had evidence. Karen arrived late, of course, clutching her coffee like she owned the place. Her expression froze the moment she saw my team seated at the head of the community clubhouse. Her smirk faltered, just a flicker, as if she sensed something wasn't quite right. The board meeting began with formalities, approving minutes, new garden budgets, minor community maintenance. And then the floor opened to members. That's when I stood up. I have a formal grievance to file against the president of this HOA, Karen Preston. I said, my voice calm but cutting through the room like a buzzsaw. There were gasps. Karen blinked, visibly thrown off. Excuse me, she stammered. I'd like the board to view the footage. I continued, nodding to Jason. He wheeled out a portable projector and connected it to his laptop. What played on the screen was a multi-angle breakdown of the day Jacob was hit. Footage from our own security camera. Footage from a neighbor's Ring camera. Even the dash cam of a passing delivery van. In slow motion, you could see Jacob cautiously crossing the street, within the crosswalk, holding a basketball. Karen's silver Lexus rolled through the stop sign. No brake lights. No hesitation. Just impact. Then you saw her step out, yell at him while he cried, and return her car like nothing happened. She saw him. Jason added as he paused the video. Here, see the twitch in her steering? That's a subconscious reaction. She saw the kid and still didn't stop. It's not an accident. It's negligence. Karen had turned pale. One of the board members spoke up, her voice shaking. Karen, you told us he ran into your car. You said he was horsing around. Karen tried to recover. That's what I was told. It all happened so fast. That's a lie, the detective interrupted, stepping forward. We subpoenaed her phone. She texted a friend after the incident, quote, dumb kid ran in front of me, but maybe now he'll learn to look both ways. His dad is a pain in the ass anyway. Gasps erupted again. Two board members put their heads in their hands. My lawyer stood. This woman not only failed to stop for a child in a residential zone, but she attempted to defame him, destroy security footage, and use her HOA authority to silence the family. That's harassment, negligence, and malicious intent. Karen stood up, shouting, this is ridiculous. You're trying to destroy me. I've served this community for 6 years. Another board member, Alan, cut her off. Karen, sit down. This isn't just about your service. This is about what you did and tried to cover up. Then came the final blow. My lawyer handed out printed copies of an emergency motion we had just filed, a formal civil lawsuit against Karen for damages, trauma, defamation, and harassment. With the evidence on record and the community present, we had more than enough to take this to court. And we weren't bluffing. Karen stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door so hard the blinds rattled. But her unraveling wasn't done yet. By the end of the week, the HOA board held an emergency vote. Karen was suspended pending full investigation. 2 other members resigned in protest, not in defense of Karen, but because they had blindly supported her in previous months and couldn't face the guilt. Meanwhile, my story, Jacob's story, had already hit the local news. Not because I pushed it, but because a detective who'd seen how deeply Karen had tried to bury the truth tipped off a journalist friend. The headline ran, Suburban HOA president hits child, blames family. Community erupts. Within 48 hours, Karen's reputation was shredded. Her real estate business took a dive. Clients canceled meetings. She tried to spin the narrative online, posting a Facebook rant about how she was a victim of a witch hunt. But it only got worse because people started coming forward. Former neighbors. Tenants she'd harassed. A young mom who said Karen tried to ban her from the community pool because her child had autism and made too much noise. Another family claimed Karen fined them over $1,000 for a plastic flamingo she claimed was unwholesome decor. Karen had ruled our neighborhood like a dictator. But when her mask cracked, it all fell apart. Back in our home, Jacob began to smile again. Not because we won anything, but because the world had finally told him that what happened to him mattered. That he wasn't just some throwaway kid caught in a power trip. That justice, even in a quiet cul-de-sac, still had a place. And it wasn't over. Karen would still have to face the lawsuit, the city's charges, and the very real possibility of jail time if it was found she'd tampered with evidence. But in that moment, watching the projector shut down, the stunned silence in Clubhouse, and Karen's empty seat, I knew she had already lost what mattered most to her, control. She thought she could hit a kid and walk away like nothing happened. She forgot one thing. I'm his father, and I wasn't walking away from anything. After the court ruling, our house was finally still again. Quiet not because of fear, but because of peace. Jacob had returned to school with a new kind of confidence. His cast gone and his spirit stronger than ever. It wasn't just the physical healing. It was the fact that the adults around him, his parents, the system, the community, had stood up and shown that what happened to him wasn't just wrong. It was unforgivable, that he mattered. As for Karen Preston, she disappeared from our lives just as suddenly and violently as she had exploded into them. The HOA removed her by unanimous vote. No hearing, no protests. The community had seen enough. And in a poetic twist of fate, the same bylaws Karen had weaponized for years were the very ones used to oust her. The clause? Any member bringing legal or civil jeopardy upon the HOA through personal conduct could be removed indefinitely. She had written that clause herself 5 years ago. During her hearing, the lawyer who read the bylaw aloud didn't even smirk. But I did, quietly from the back row. Karen lost her license for reckless endangerment and felony hit and run. A reduced sentence, yes, but it came with a hefty price. 6 months house arrest, 2 years probation, and mandatory anger management. And while I had no interest in watching her squirm, I was sent a picture a few weeks later from a neighbor. Karen, dethroned, ankle monitor on, dressed in sweats, tending to weeds at her lawn while a group of neighborhood kids chalked smiley faces on her driveway. Jacob's name was written in bright orange. I laughed. It wasn't the vindictive kind. It wasn't joy in someone suffering. It was a cosmic irony of someone who thought they were above consequences being humbled in the most suburban way imaginable. By that point, our neighborhood had come full circle. The folks who once smiled cautiously now waved with both hands. Kids had started playing in the cul-de-sac again, and for the first time in months, we hosted a barbecue in our backyard. Open invite. People brought dishes. Jacob tossed beanbags with his friends. The air smelled like charcoal and freedom. And when someone accidentally parked just a little too far across the curb line, no one said a word. Melissa and I took a walk later that evening. Just the two of us. The sky was purple. Our feet crunched softly on the sidewalk. And when we passed Karen's house, we didn't slow down. Her blinds were drawn, her porch light off. The front yard was bare, her once perfect flower beds dried out and ignored. I almost feel bad for her, Melissa whispered. I shook my head. Don't. She hit a kid and blamed him. Yeah, she nodded, but at least she doesn't run the neighborhood anymore. I grinned. No, now it runs just fine without her. But the real twist, the thing that still makes me chuckle to this day, a few months later, Karen's house went up for sale. She couldn't afford the mortgage anymore, not without her husband's pension, not with the fines. And guess who bought it? The same family whose mailbox she once tried to fine for being an inch too high. They threw the biggest welcome party you've ever seen. Jacob rode his bike down the same sidewalk where he was once hit, confident, smiling, free, and somewhere behind a curtain in a rental 2 towns over. I like to imagine Karen watching through binoculars, realizing she didn't just lose control of an HOA. She lost the war for her own little kingdom. And peace, true, quiet, healing peace, finally returned to our street.